My wife won $10 million in the lottery, and instead of celebrating with me, she erased me. She cheated, humiliated me in front of her family and her new lover, and made sure everyone believed I was the problem. I was thrown out like I never mattered, while she spent the money on cars, jewelry, and a new life that didn't include me. What she didn't expect was that the lottery ticket she won wasn't hers alone, and that the truth would eventually catch up to her in court. But that wasn't how it started. For years, my wife and I had a routine that never felt important enough to remember. Once every month, usually on a Saturday morning, we'd stop at the same small convenience store near our apartment. We didn't buy groceries there. We didn't linger. We bought lottery tickets. Always the same way. She picked a few numbers. I picked a few numbers. We split the cost evenly, half from her card, half from mine. It wasn't about believing we'd win. It was a habit, something small that felt shared. We used to joke about it on the drive home. If we ever win, she'd say, I'm quitting everything. I'd laugh and tell her I'd still work, just without the constant pressure. Years went by like that. Tickets checked. Tickets tossed. Life unchanged. Until one month, when everything quietly broke. She didn't tell me she'd won. There was no call, no scream, no running into the house waving a ticket in the air. I didn't notice anything that day, or even the next. What I noticed was the absence of things. She stopped asking about bills, stopped caring about overtime, stopped talking about the future like it included effort. Then came the changes that didn't come with explanations. She bought new clothes, not practical ones, designer pieces that still had tags hidden inside. Jewelry appeared that I didn't recognize. When I asked, she brushed it off. A friend's. A discount. Borrowed. She stopped buying lottery tickets with me. Said it was pointless now. That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. She started guarding her phone, tilting the screen away, taking calls in another room, smiling at messages she didn't share, coming home later than usual with excuses that didn't quite fit. I didn't accuse her. I didn't ask questions she could lie to. I watched. People who are hiding something big don't get caught because they're careless once. They get caught because they think they're safe. That moment came when I found an envelope in a drawer she never used. Not hidden well, just forgotten. Inside were printed documents, numbers, dates, official stamps, and one line that made my stomach drop. Winning amount, $10 million. My wife had won $10 million. Alone. At least, that's what she thought. I sat there on the floor with the papers in my hands, not shaking, not panicking, just replaying everything I'd ignored. The distance, the contempt, the way she'd started talking to me like I was temporary. The money hadn't changed her overnight. It had revealed her. Over the next few weeks, her behavior sharpened. She stopped pretending. Arguments became frequent and pointless. She accused me of things that didn't make sense, being controlling, being distant, being unfaithful. It felt rehearsed. Then her friends started showing up more often. A woman I barely knew. Loud, confident, too familiar. One evening, she came over while my wife was out. She crossed lines deliberately, sat too close, touched my arm, said things that were meant to sound innocent but weren't. I understood immediately. This wasn't temptation. It was a setup. They wanted a scene, a misunderstanding, something she could use later to say she had no choice but to leave. Something that made me look guilty so no one would ask questions about money. I didn't fall for it. Instead, my wife escalated. She picked fights in front of others. She told her family I was changing, that I was cold, that I wasn't the man she married. By the time she finally packed a bag and walked out, the story was already written. I was the villain. Her family believed her. Her friends supported her. And the man she'd been seeing stepped into the picture openly. I was humiliated, spoken to like I was nothing, pushed out of the marriage without explanations, without dignity. They thought I'd walk away quietly. What none of them knew was that every lottery ticket we'd ever bought had been paid for together. Half from her, half from me, month after month, year after year. And that mattered, because money doesn't erase truth. It only delays it. She didn't wait long to enjoy the money. Once she was out of the house, it was like restraint no longer applied to her. Within weeks, the quiet upgrades turned into loud statements. A luxury car appeared in her driveway. Bright, expensive, impossible to miss. Photos followed. Designer bags. Jewelry that looked heavy even through a phone screen. Then came the villa. Not rented. Bought. A place big enough to announce permanence, as if she'd already rewritten her life without me in it. She made sure I saw it. Mutual friends mentioned it casually, pretending not to notice my reaction. Her family stopped being polite altogether. They spoke to me like someone who had lost his place, like the money had exposed my inferiority all along. I wasn't just her ex-husband in their eyes. I was a mistake she'd finally corrected. The man she left me for didn't hide either. He started showing up with her everywhere. At family gatherings. At parties she never used to attend. Always confident. Always comfortable spending money that wasn't his. He wore her success like it belonged to him, standing close, touching her shoulder, smiling in photos that felt deliberately staged. They wanted me to see that too. And I did. Not because I stalked them. Because they wanted witnesses. One afternoon, her sister confronted me directly. Told me I should be grateful my wife had outgrown me. That I should stop pretending I was ever on her level. Her parents echoed it later, less politely. They accused me of trying to hold on to someone who had clearly moved on to better things. When I reminded them that I had contributed just as much to our life as she had, they laughed. Lottery money doesn't work that way, her father said. She won it. Not you. They had already decided the story. I was poor, disposable, replaceable. What none of them seemed to understand was that I wasn't asking for charity. I wasn't begging for a piece of her new life. I was watching her destroy her own position without realizing it. The spending didn't slow down. It escalated. She bought gifts for her parents, paid off her brother's debt, funded vacations for friends who suddenly reappeared. Her new partner quit his job within months, confident that she'd carry the weight. Expensive clothes replaced practical ones. Appearances became everything. Money that arrives without effort disappears without resistance. And she never once asked herself a simple question. What happens if someone challenges this? I didn't confront her. I didn't warn her. I didn't tell anyone what I knew. Instead, I gathered records, bank statements, old receipts, proof of every lottery ticket purchase we'd ever made together, dates, payment splits, consistency, years of 50-50 contributions. That's what made the difference. The moment I contacted an attorney, everything became quiet again. No drama, no threats, just clarity. The law doesn't care about new lovers or rewritten narratives. It cares about facts. And the facts were inconvenient for her. When the summons arrived, she panicked. I heard about it through a mutual acquaintance first. She'd laughed it off publicly, told people it was a desperate move that would go nowhere. Privately, she was frantic. Called her lawyer immediately. Asked questions she should have asked months earlier. By then, it was too late. The court didn't care that she had already spent a large portion of the money. Luxury cars, jewelry, real estate, gifts. It was all still considered part of the marital asset pool. The money didn't stop being shared just because she'd decided to act alone. Her confidence cracked for the first time when her lawyer explained it to her. I didn't see her reaction, but I heard about it. Anger first, then disbelief, then panic. She tried to intimidate me through intermediaries. Subtle threats. Messages suggesting I was ruining her life out of spite. That I should be reasonable. That dragging this into court would only hurt everyone involved. I didn't respond. A few days later, her lawyer requested a private meeting. An offer. 10%. They framed it as generosity. As a chance for me to walk away quietly with something instead of risking everything. I declined without countering. Then came a second offer. 15%. Then 25%. Each one delivered with a warning about how long court battles could take. How draining they could be. How unpredictable outcomes were. I listened politely and said no every time. Because I wasn't negotiating from desperation. I was negotiating from math. The law didn't care how thin she'd stretched herself. It didn't care how loudly her family defended her. It didn't care how confident her new partner looked standing beside her. It cared about who paid. And I had proof. By the time the case moved forward, the tone changed. Her lawyer stopped sounding confident. The offer stopped coming. Silence replaced pressure. That's usually what happens when people realize they've miscalculated. If you're listening to this and wondering why I didn't just take the smaller amount and disappear, understand this. Sometimes accepting less isn't peace. Sometimes it's permission for someone else to rewrite the truth. And I wasn't interested in disappearing quietly. The first court date didn't look like justice. It looked like paperwork. No raised voices. No dramatic speeches. Just lawyers, folders, and a judge who had seen hundreds of people sit exactly where we were sitting, each convinced their situation was unique. I stayed quiet. I let my attorney do the talking. Across the room, my wife sat stiffly beside hers, dressed carefully, posture confident, like she was still playing a role she hadn't realized was already collapsing. She didn't look at me. Her new partner wasn't allowed inside. That was the first small crack. Her lawyer started with confidence. He spoke about individual winnings, about intent, about how the ticket had been claimed in her name. He painted the picture they'd rehearsed: an unhappy marriage, a woman finally finding independence, a man trying to claw his way into money that was never his. My lawyer didn't interrupt. He waited. Then he slid a stack of documents across the table. Years of lottery purchases, dates highlighted, payment records, 2 names, 2 cards, every single month. No gaps, no ambiguity. A clear pattern of shared intent and shared contribution that went back longer than anyone in that room had expected. The judge leaned forward. That was the moment her confidence shifted. Not visibly, not yet, but I could feel it. Because confidence built on illusion doesn't survive scrutiny, it just delays its own collapse. The judge asked her a simple question. Did you and your husband regularly purchase lottery tickets together using shared funds? She hesitated. Her lawyer answered for her. Yes, but... The judge raised a hand. I asked her. Silence stretched longer than it should have. Yes, she said finally. That single word changed the temperature of the room. The rest of the hearing moved slowly, deliberately. The judge explained what her lawyer should have explained months earlier. That marital assets don't become individual property just because someone acts quickly. That reckless spending doesn't erase obligation. That intent matters, but contribution matters more. When we left the courtroom that day, her lawyer didn't look at me. He spoke quietly to her instead, face tight, words clipped. The confidence was gone, replaced with urgency. That urgency followed her everywhere after that. She called friends less, stopped posting photos. The luxury car disappeared from social media. Jewelry stopped appearing. The villa she'd bought was suddenly under renovation, though everyone knew what that meant. Cash problems don't announce themselves loudly. They whisper first. Her family turned anxious. Her parents, who had once laughed at me, suddenly stopped returning her calls as often. Her brother, whose debts she'd cleared, started asking questions about when more help was coming. Her new partner stayed, for a while, but the tone changed. He stopped showing up publicly, stopped making appearances that looked permanent. When money stops flowing, people stop pretending. Behind the scenes, the offers returned. This time, they weren't framed as generosity. They were framed as compromise. Her lawyer contacted mine again. Different tone. More respectful. More cautious. 30%, he said. Final offer. I declined. 40%, he said days later. She's willing to sell assets. I declined again. By then, the judge had already ordered a full financial disclosure. That was the real threat. Every purchase, every transfer, every gift, everything she'd spent on family, friends, and the man she thought would stay. The law doesn't care who you give money to. It follows the trail backward. And the trail was long. She tried to delay, asked for extensions, claimed stress, claimed confusion, claimed she hadn't understood the consequences. The court didn't care. Each delay only made the accounting worse. The second hearing felt different. She looked thinner, tired, less polished. The confidence she'd worn like armor was gone, replaced by something brittle. Her lawyer spoke less. My lawyer spoke more. The judge asked sharper questions. How much of the $10 million remains liquid? Which assets can be recovered? Which expenditures were made without spousal consent? There were no good answers. Because the truth was simple. She had spent like someone who believed consequences were optional. The ruling didn't come that day, but the direction was clear. The court recognized the winnings as marital property. 50%. Non-negotiable. The only remaining question was how she would pay it, not if she had to. When we walked out of the courthouse, she finally looked at me. Not with anger, with fear. That was the moment I understood something important. She hadn't left because she stopped loving me. She had left because she thought money had replaced accountability. She was wrong, and she was about to find out just how expensive that mistake would be. The final judgment didn't arrive with drama. It arrived with certainty. By the time we were back in court, the outcome had already been shaped by math, records, and the kind of silence that follows when excuses run out. The judge didn't look impressed. He didn't look sympathetic either. He looked tired in the way people do when they've seen the same mistake made by different faces too many times. The ruling was clear. The lottery winnings were marital property, purchased consistently with shared funds, claimed during the marriage, spent without consent. 50% of the total amount legally belonged to me. There was no room left to argue. Her lawyer tried once more, softer this time, framing it as a logistical problem instead of a moral one. He spoke about liquidity issues, about assets already sold or transferred, about the difficulty of recovering gifts and expenses already incurred. The judge listened. Then he responded with something that landed harder than any accusation. That is not the court's concern. What mattered wasn't how inconvenient repayment would be. What mattered was obligation. She was ordered to pay half of the $10 million. $5 million. The number sat in the room like weight. She didn't cry. Not then. She didn't protest either. She just stared forward, hands folded too tightly, jaws set as if she could physically hold the situation together by force. She couldn't. The next phase was brutal in ways no one talks about. Assets were evaluated. Accounts frozen. Titles examined. The luxury car she'd paraded around town? Flagged. The villa she'd bought to announce her independence? Under scrutiny. Jewelry, designer items, cash transfers. Everything she'd used to prove she'd moved on was suddenly evidence. Her family panicked. The gifts she'd given them weren't gifts anymore. They were liabilities. Requests started coming in quietly at first. Polite inquiries about what could be kept, what needed to be returned. Then came anger. Accusations. Claims that she'd never told them the money wasn't entirely hers. They didn't offer to help her repay anything. They distanced themselves instead. Her parents stopped calling daily. Her brother, who'd once been grateful for the debts she cleared, became unreachable. The friends who'd vacationed on her dime stopped posting photos with her. Invitations dried up. Money attracts loyalty. Loss reveals contracts. Her new partner was the last to leave. He stayed longer than the others, confident at first that something would work out, that the court would settle, that some loophole would appear. He spoke in half-promises and reassurance, but the tone changed once the first asset was seized. Once the car was gone. Once the villa was listed. Once reality stopped being abstract. He didn't fight with her. He didn't argue. He just stopped answering messages. Stopped coming home. Eventually, he sent a short text explaining that he couldn't handle the stress and needed space. Space, it turned out, meant gone. By the time the money was finally transferred to me, she had almost nothing left. What remained wasn't enough to rebuild. Not enough to maintain appearances. Not enough to pretend she'd made the right choice. The irony was sharp. She had won $10 million and lost everything that mattered within months. I didn't celebrate when the funds hit my account. I didn't tell anyone. I paid off debts quietly, invested conservatively, made decisions with the kind of patience that comes from having already watched money destroy someone else's judgment. For her, the collapse didn't stop with finances. It followed her reputation. People talked, quietly at first, then openly. The story changed. The narrative she'd built, of an unfaithful husband and a woman reclaiming her life, didn't survive the court ruling. Facts replaced sympathy. Whispers replaced applause. She tried to explain herself. To friends. To relatives. To anyone who would listen. But explanations sound hollow when the outcome is public record. That's when she reached out to me. Not once. Repeatedly. Messages at first. Long ones. Apologetic ones. Then calls. Then messages through friends. Through relatives. Through people I barely remembered knowing. She told them she'd made a mistake. That she'd been confused. That the money had changed her perspective. That she finally understood what she'd thrown away. I didn't respond. Silence isn't cruelty. It's clarity. When you've said everything that matters in court, there's nothing left to explain privately. She didn't accept that easily. She started showing up at places she knew I'd be. Grocery stores. Coffee shops. Even outside my workplace once. Each time, thinner. Less composed. Eyes red from crying that didn't seem to stop when she wanted it to. I never spoke to her. Not because I hated her, but because there was nothing left to negotiate. The court had settled the money. Life had settled the rest. The messages started the same way every time. Apologies first. Long ones. Carefully written. Words chosen to sound sincere instead of panicked. She talked about growth. About reflection. About how the money had distorted her thinking. She said she finally understood what she had done. Not just to me, but to herself. I didn't reply. That silence didn't discourage her. It escalated her. When words didn't work, she tried timing. Messages late at night. Messages early in the morning. Missed calls spaced just far enough apart to look accidental instead of desperate. Then came voice notes. Her voice was different in them. Softer, strained, almost unfamiliar. She cried openly in a few. In others, she tried to sound composed and failed halfway through. Still, I didn't respond. Then she tried sending messages through people who used to matter to me. An old friend reached out first. Awkwardly, told me she was really struggling, and asked if I could at least talk to her once. I said no. A cousin followed. Then someone I barely knew but remembered from a family gathering years ago. Each time, the message was the same. She was sorry. She had learned her lesson. She wanted to fix things. There was nothing to fix. The marriage had ended the moment she decided I was expendable. When intermediaries failed, she turned to visibility. She started posting online again. Not the confident displays from before. These were different. Cryptic quotes about loss. About mistakes. About realizing the value of something only after it's gone. Old photos appeared. Carefully selected ones where we looked happy, where nothing seemed broken yet. She wanted the world to remember a version of us that no longer existed. I blocked her. That's when the panic became impossible to hide. She showed up at my apartment one evening without warning. I saw her through the window before she knocked. She looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Clothes hung loosely on her frame, like they belonged to someone else. Her hair wasn't styled the way it used to be. Her face looked tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. I didn't open the door. She knocked anyway. Soft at first, then harder. "I know you're in there," she said through the door. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. "Please, just 5 minutes. I don't want anything. I just need to talk." I stayed silent. She slid down the door and sat on the floor outside. I could hear her breathing. Uneven. Shallow. The sound carried through the wood in a way that felt intrusive, like she was trying to make herself impossible to ignore. "I ruined everything," she said quietly. "I know that now. I don't care about the money. I don't care about anything except fixing what I broke." I didn't move. She cried for a long time. Then the crying stopped. Then she knocked once more. Softer. "I'll wait," she said. "As long as it takes." I left the apartment through the back entrance. That was the moment she finally understood I wasn't negotiating. Over the next few weeks, her life continued to shrink. Without money, the people who once orbited her disappeared completely. Friends stopped returning calls. Family stopped offering help. The same parents who had once humiliated me now told her she needed to take responsibility and move on. Responsibility, it turned out, was easy to demand when it no longer came with financial benefit. She tried to work again, took a job beneath the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. It didn't last. She couldn't focus. She couldn't stop checking her phone. She couldn't stop replaying the moment she realized the money hadn't saved her. It had exposed her. That's when she tried one last approach. Not through friends. Not through family. Not through guilt. Through coincidence. I was leaving a cafe one afternoon when I saw her standing across the street. She hadn't followed me. She hadn't planned it that way. Or at least that's what she claimed later. But she crossed when she saw me and stood in front of me, hands shaking slightly. She looked worse up close. Weight loss. Dark circles. Skin dull from stress and lack of sleep. This wasn't performative sadness. This was collapse. "Please," she said. "I know you don't owe me anything. I just need you to hear me." I looked at her for a moment. Really looked. Not with anger. Not with longing. Just recognition. She was someone I used to know. "I heard you already," I said calmly. "You told me everything when you walked away." Tears filled her eyes immediately. "I was wrong," she said. "I thought the money meant freedom. I thought I could rewrite my life. I didn't know it would cost me everything." "That's the problem," I replied. "You didn't think it would cost you." She reached for my hand. I stepped back. "I would give it all back," she said. "Every dollar. I don't care. I just want us." "That's not true," I said. "If you didn't care about the money, you wouldn't have tried to erase me before anyone knew it existed." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She knew. "I'm filing for divorce," I continued. "The papers will reach you soon." She nodded slowly, like her body had finally accepted what her mind kept rejecting. "I'll sign," she whispered. "I know," I said. That was the last conversation we ever had. The divorce process itself was almost anticlimactic. After everything that had happened, the money, the court, the humiliation, the collapse, what remained was paperwork and waiting. She didn't contest anything. She didn't negotiate. She signed where she was told to sign, on the dates she was given, without argument. Whatever fight she had left in her had already been spent in the months leading up to it. I noticed something strange during that period. She stopped trying to convince me she had changed. Instead, she tried to convince herself. The messages I received through third parties shifted in tone. They were no longer about fixing us. They were about how broken she felt, how lost, how she didn't recognize her own decisions anymore, how the money had made her feel powerful at first, then hollow, then terrified. I never responded. Not because I was angry, but because engaging would have given her hope. And hope, in this case, would have been cruelty. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt nothing dramatic. No relief, no grief, just a quiet sense of completion, like closing a book I'd already finished reading weeks ago. I went to work that morning like any other day. Answered emails, attended meetings, spoke calmly. No one there knew what had ended officially on paper that afternoon, and I didn't feel the need to tell them. Some things don't need witnesses. After work, I went home and sat in silence for a while. Not the heavy silence from before. This one was different. Clean. Empty in a way that felt intentional. I realized something then. I wasn't replaying conversations anymore. I wasn't wondering what I could have done differently. I wasn't checking my phone expecting her name to appear. The noise had finally stopped. That's when the memories started coming back, but differently. Not as wounds, as lessons. I remembered the early years. The lottery tickets, the jokes, the small shared routines that once felt insignificant. I understood now that those routines weren't small at all. They were signals, proof of partnership. And the moment she decided to hide the biggest event of our lives from me, she'd already left the marriage in her mind. Everything that followed had just been logistics. Her life, meanwhile, continued unraveling quietly. I heard about it indirectly, not because I asked, but because people talk when stories reverse themselves. She moved out of the villa, sold what little she could, took a smaller apartment in an area she once would have dismissed. She tried to rebuild relationships that had been transactional from the start. Most didn't rebuild. The friends who'd laughed with her when she humiliated me avoided her now. The family members who had treated me like a burden spoke to her in tones that sounded suspiciously like disappointment. Not because they cared about what she'd done to me, but because the money was gone. Her new love interest never reappeared. Once the last asset was liquidated, once the last illusion of comfort disappeared, he vanished completely. No dramatic breakup. No explanation. Just absence. She tried reaching out again after the divorce was finalized. New number. New message. Short this time. I'm not asking to come back. I just want to talk. I blocked it. Then another message through social media. Then another through someone I'd once trusted. Each time, the answer was the same. Nothing. I changed my number. Reduced my online presence. Simplified my life intentionally. The more distance I created, the lighter everything felt. Not because I was running, but because I no longer needed to stay alert. That was when something unexpected happened. I met someone new. Not dramatically. Not during a moment of weakness. It wasn't a rebound or a distraction. It was quiet and unforced. A conversation that didn't feel like effort. Someone who asked questions and actually listened to the answers. Someone who didn't need money to feel secure or attention to feel validated. There was no rush. No declarations. Just consistency. Being around her felt normal. And after everything I'd been through, normal felt rare. Valuable. I didn't tell her everything at once. I didn't need to. She didn't push. She didn't probe. She accepted what I chose to share and respected what I kept private. That was new. That was what trust felt like when it wasn't negotiated. Meanwhile, my ex continued to deteriorate in quieter ways. She lost weight. Friends noticed. Coworkers noticed. People who once envied her now spoke about her with pity. She tried therapy, then stopped. Tried work again, then quit. Tried to rebuild a social life, then withdrew. She had won $10 million and ended up alone. The last time I heard about her, it wasn't through gossip. It was through someone who sounded genuinely concerned. They said she cried often, that she talked about the past like it was a place she could still return to if she explained herself well enough. But the past doesn't reopen. It just fades. By the time I realized how far I'd come, I wasn't measuring my progress against her anymore. I was measuring it against who I used to be. The man who believed shared routines guaranteed shared values. I knew better now, and I was moving forward without looking back. By the time a full year had passed, the story no longer felt heavy. It felt finished. I didn't think about the money much anymore. It was there, invested quietly, doing what money is supposed to do when it's handled without emotion. It didn't define my days. It didn't replace anything I'd lost. It simply existed, separate from who I was. What mattered more was what never returned. The anxiety, the second-guessing, the feeling that I had to earn respect inside my own marriage. Those were gone. The woman I was seeing didn't ask about my past in ways that felt invasive. She didn't measure my worth against what I provided. She didn't treat stability like boredom or loyalty like limitation. Being with her felt easy in the way things do when no one is keeping score. That was the real contrast. My ex, on the other hand, kept trying to relive the moment before everything went wrong. She sent messages through people who still spoke to both of us. Apologies that arrived too late. Regret that had nowhere to land. By then, I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just unavailable. Some doors closed loudly. Others closed so quietly that the only proof they ever existed is the echo that follows. She had believed $10 million would buy her freedom. What it bought instead was clarity, about who stayed when there was nothing left to offer. I didn't win the lottery. I won something harder. My peace. And if you stayed with this story until the end, thank you for listening. Stories like this aren't about revenge or money. They're about choices, consequences, and what happens when someone finally decides not to chase what already walked away. If you enjoy stories like this and don't want to miss the next one, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. More stories are coming.